All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Football's on the menu today, but we're not just talking touchdowns or, the big hits. This is more behind the scenes. We're looking at, well, a legacy, one with amazing achievements for sure, but also some, let's call them memorable moments. Our main player today is Mike Vanderjagt. The Indianapolis Colts are right there with him. And the big question, the one that won't go away is, why isn't a kicker with a record as good as his in the Colts Ring of Honor?
That's a good question to start with. What makes this story really grab you is that it makes you think. How do we actually define success when we talk pro sports? Is it all about the numbers, the stats? Or is there something more, some kind of unwritten rule book that affects the player's lasting image,
It's a great point. And to dig into it, we're using a recent article. It's from The Athletic. Vanderjagt himself tells his story there, lays it all out, gives us a chance to see things from his side, why he thinks this recognition is missing. But before we get into any of the controversy, let's lay down the facts. Vanderjagt was, for a period of time, the most accurate kicker in NFL history. That's not luck. That's consistently performing under pressure. Clutch. Every time.
Exactly right. To reach that level of accuracy, you need a few things. Obviously, talent, a ton of it, but also you need that mental strength, rock solid. You have to deliver when everything's on the line. That combination, it's rare, but like we see so often in sports, a single moment, just one, can overshadow an entire career.
And for Vanderjagt, that moment, well, it's burned into a lot of Colts fans' memories. The missed field goal, 2005 playoffs, against the Steelers. Colts were the favorites, heavily. Everyone thought they were on their way to a Super Bowl win, and then that kick.
Sailed walk. It's almost textbook, When you study sports psychology, how one tiny moment, a split-second choice, becomes the way everyone sees your whole career, makes you think about the pressure these athletes deal with, how even the best, the most skilled, can be affected by it.
And now you'd think, missing one field goal, even in a game that big, wouldn't erase years of breaking records. But Vanderjagt's story, it goes beyond that miss. He had a reputation, let's just say he was outspoken. There was this interview. After a playoff loss back in 2002, he questioned, well, the leadership, both Peyton Manning and Tony Dungy. He implied, kind of, that they didn't have what it takes to win it all.
That's interesting, right? Because it shows how team dynamics at that elite level are fragile. You go out there and publicly criticize your own team's leaders, especially guys like Manning and Dungy. It's a bold move, one that probably didn't sit well with the Colts.
No, it definitely caused some tension, and it escalated from there. Peyton Manning, he even called Vanderjagt the liquored-up kicker at the Pro Bowl, obviously a jab at that post-game interview. But the thing that really makes you scratch your head is this. After that infamous missed field goal against the Steelers, Vanderjagt goes on a late-night talk show, and he kicks a field goal, same distance as the one he missed in the playoffs, right there on the streets of New York City.
That's a move with a few interpretations. Some might see it as just a publicity thing. Others, maybe a desperate attempt to control the story. But you gotta wonder, right, was it defiance? A way of getting back at the Colts? Or was it something else entirely? Something deeper? Maybe a way to prove something to himself? To get rid of those demons?
It's definitely an interesting puzzle, psychologically speaking. And the Athletic article, it says this pattern, this strained relationship, it kept going. Even after Vanderjagt left the Colts, he claims they've totally shut him out. No invite to Dwight Freeney's Hall of Fame ceremony, nothing. Which is weird because apparently Freeney specifically asked the Colts to invite all his old teammates.
Yeah, that detail does stick out. It makes it seem like there might be some resentment on the Colts side. More than just disagreeing publicly a few times. Makes you think, what if Vanderjagt had just retired after the Colts? No incidents, nothing. Would it be the same? Is it really about his performance on the field? Or is there something else going on?
It almost feels personal, doesn't it? That's what makes this whole thing so interesting. It's a story about human emotions, pride, resentment, that desire for recognition. But it also makes us think about the relationship between individual players and the teams. It's complicated.
Yeah, you're right on the money there. It brings up the question, who gets to decide a player's legacy? Is it the team? They're focused on their image, the whole we're all in this together thing? Or is it the player? With his own story, his own view. This isn't just about football. It's about how we value people's contributions, even when there's controversy.
And it gets even trickier from here. We can't forget Adam Vinatieri, the guy who replaced Vanderjagt. He won a Super Bowl with the Colts. And guess what? He's not in the Ring of Honor either. So is there some unspoken bias against kickers in Indianapolis?
Now, that's a sharp observation. Adds another layer to this whole thing. The Colts Ring of Honor, just so everyone knows, it's the highest honor they give out. Former players, coaches, anyone who's had a big lasting impact on the team. So when you see two incredibly successful kickers left out, yeah, it raises some eyebrows.
For sure. You'd think winning a Super Bowl would guarantee you a spot, but maybe there's more to it. What do you have to do to get in? Is there a committee? A vote?
Well, how they pick people for the Colts Ring of Honor, it's kind of secret. They don't have like a public checklist or a formal vote. Seems like it's an internal decision. Probably involves the owner, general manager, those big wigs.
So it's not just about the stats or championships. It's like there's this feeling whether a player really embodies the Colts way or something. And maybe that's where Vanderjagt's personality comes in. All those controversial moments, they come back to haunt him.
It's possible. Pro sports, especially team sports, they're not just about individual performance. Teams want players who fit a certain mold. They buy into the team culture, represent the organization well, on the field and off. And Vanderjagt, with his, let's say, his outspokenness, his tendency to make headlines, he might not have been the ideal fit.
But let's play devil's advocate for a second. Imagine Vanderjagt was a quarterback or a wide receiver. Same stats, same controversies off the field. Would he be treated any differently?
That's a great question. Gets to the core of how we see different roles on a team. It's no secret, right? Quarterbacks, wide receivers, they get all the glory. The touchdowns, the headlines, they're at the top of the football hierarchy.
And what if a star quarterback said the same things about his coach or teammates? Would people just say he's passionate or competitive? Would he be a fiery leader instead of a problem? Makes you think, is there a double standard here?
It's definitely worth thinking about. Maybe the Colts, like a lot of pro sports teams, they're more okay with outspoken players if those players are seen as essential to winning. Or maybe there's something deeper. They're hesitant to fully accept anyone who doesn't fit the mold, even if they achieve a lot on the field.
Vanderjagt, in that Athletic article, he makes it clear this isn't just about the Ring of Honor. He feels like he's been wiped from Colts history. No invites to events, no acknowledgement of what he did, like they're pretending he never played for them.
That's a powerful statement. Shows there's a lot of hurt and frustration there. It seems like for Vanderjagt, it's about more than just awards. It's about respect, feeling valued, having people recognize his contribution, even if there were some bumps along the way.
Makes you think about the human side of pro sports, right? These are real people with real emotions. And years later, that feeling of rejection, of resentment, it can stick around.
Absolutely. Brings up important questions about how organizations deal with former players, especially those who, well, maybe didn't leave on the best terms. Is there a responsibility to recognize what they did, even if there was controversy? Or do you just move on, focus on the present and the future?
And for the fans, how do we see these situations? Do we care most about what happens on the field and ignore everything else? Or do we hold players to a higher standard? They have to be role models on and off the field. There's no easy answer. It probably comes down to each person's values and perspective.
You've hit on something important. Our own beliefs and expectations, they shape how we see athletes and their legacies. Do we think of them as entertainers? Their job is to perform, to make us happy. Or do we expect more? They have to represent our values, be a certain kind of person.
I think it's a mix of things. We're drawn to their athleticism, their skill, the excitement of the game. But we also want to believe in the players we support, to see them as heroes who embody the best of the sport.
And that's where the human part comes in. We're fascinated by the stories behind the stats, the personal struggles, the triumphs, the things that shape their lives. And with Vanderjagt, his story reminds us, even the most talented people, they're complex, they're flawed, they're capable of great things and mistakes.
It's a story that connects with us because it reflects our own humanity, our own struggles with success and failure, pride and humility. And it makes us face those tough questions about forgiveness, redemption, the impact our actions have.
It really is interesting, right? We build up these stories about athletes, put them on a pedestal. We expect them to be perfect. But the truth is, they're human, just like us. They mess up, they say things they regret, and they have to deal with the consequences.
And for Vanderjagt, it seems like those consequences have lasted a long time. He said he wants some kind of reconciliation for the Colts to acknowledge that his contributions mattered, but so far, nothing.
Makes you wonder, does time really heal everything? Especially in the world of professional sports. There's this idea that winning fixes everything. Past problems don't matter if the team is doing well, but here it seemed like the hurt goes deeper.
What I find fascinating is both sides seem stuck in their own versions of the story. Vanderjagt sees himself as the hero who got wronged, and the Colts, they seem to be protecting their image, this narrative of unity and success.
That clash of narratives, that's at the heart of it all. It shows the power dynamics, the struggle between individual expression and the demands of the team. And it makes you ask, is forgiveness even possible here?
Do you think there's a way forward for Vanderjagt and the Colts? Can they ever reconcile, recognize what happened without bringing up all the old pain?
Tough to say. Both sides would have to be willing to listen, to understand each other, to let go of those deeply held stories they've been telling themselves. Vanderjagt would have to admit the impact of his actions, and the Colts would have to be open to seeing what he contributed, even with all the controversy.
It's a lot to ask, definitely, but not impossible. Maybe this deep dive can be a starting point, a way to get people talking about legacy, forgiveness, the human side of pro sports.
I hope listeners come away from this with a sense of empathy, and understanding that even in the most competitive, high-pressure environments, we're all human, we all make mistakes, we all want to be recognized and appreciated.
It's a good reminder that the stories we tell ourselves, the ones we hold on to, they can really affect our relationships and our ability to move on. And sometimes the hardest but most rewarding path is the one that leads to forgiveness and making things right.
And maybe this story can encourage us all to be a little more understanding, a little more forgiving, not just in sports, but in our own lives too.
Well, there you have it. The story of Mike Vanderjagt and the Indianapolis Colts. A story that goes way beyond missed field goals and controversial interviews. It's about human emotions, the complexity of legacy, and the power of the stories we tell. We hope this deep dive has given you something to think about. Some new perspectives on the world of pro sports and the people in it. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep those conversations going.
Yeah, it's about who gets to tell the story, right?
Yeah.
And this is where things get even more, well, more complicated.
Oh, yeah.
We got to remember Adam Vinatieri, the guy who came in after Vanderjagt, won a Super Bowl with the Colts, the whole deal. Guess what? He's not in the Ring of Honor either.
Seriously.
Yep.
So now we got to ask, is there some kind of, I don't know, unwritten rule against kickers in Indy?
That's a good point. And it adds a whole other layer to this whole thing. The Colts Ring of Honor, for those who might not know, it's the top honor the organization gives out to players, coaches, anyone who's made a real difference for the franchise. So 2 kickers, both super successful, left out. Yeah, that's definitely strange.
Right. You figure a Super Bowl win, that's got to be a ticket in. But maybe it's not that simple. What are the rules, even? Is there a committee, a vote?
Well, the whole process is a bit of a mystery. They don't really say how they choose people, no public criteria, no official voting or anything like that.
Yeah.
It seems like it's all done internally. Probably involves the owner, the general manager, the folks at the top.
So it's more than just numbers on a sheet or trophies. It's like they got to fit the image of the Colts. And maybe that's where Vanderjagt's personality clashes. All those times he spoke out, made headlines, it comes back to bite him.
Could be. Pro sports, especially team sports, it's not always about individual talent. Teams look for players who, fit the culture. They buy into the team's way of doing things. They represent the organization well, both on the field and off.
Yeah.
And Vanderjagt, with his tendency to be, outspoken, to create a stir, maybe he just wasn't the perfect fit for that image.
But let's flip the script for a second. Let's say Vanderjagt was a quarterback or a wide receiver. Same stats, same stuff happening off the field. You think he'd be treated differently?
That's a thought-provoking question. It gets at how we value different positions in team sports. I mean, it's obvious, right? Quarterbacks, wide receivers, they get the attention, the touchdowns, the big contracts. They're the stars, the faces of the franchise.
So if a star quarterback said the same things about his coach, his teammates, would people just brush it off, call it passion, competitiveness? Would he be the fiery leader instead of the guy causing trouble? Makes you think, is there a double standard?
Absolutely something to consider. Maybe for the Colts, like a lot of teams. They have a higher tolerance if a player is seen as crucial to winning, even if they're outspoken, controversial. Or maybe it's something deeper, a reluctance to embrace anyone who doesn't fit the mold, no matter what they achieve on the field.
Vanderjagt, in that article from The Athletic, he makes it clear it's not just about the Ring of Honor. It's like he feels erased from Colts history. No invites, no recognition, nothing. Like they're trying to pretend he was never there.
That's a strong statement. It shows a lot of hurt, a lot of frustration. For him, it seems like it's more than just awards or recognition. It's about respect, feeling valued, having his contribution acknowledged, even if there were some bumps along the road.
It makes you realize there's a human side to all this, right? These are people with feelings.
Yeah.
And even years later, that rejection, that resentment, it lingers.
Yeah, for sure. And it raises a question about how teams treat their former players, especially the ones who, didn't leave on the best terms. Do they have a responsibility to recognize what those players did, even with the controversy? Or is it just move on, focus on what's happening now, the future?
And as fans, Where do we stand on all this? Do we only care about the game itself, the wins and losses? Or do we hold players to a higher standard, expect them to be role models on and off the field? It's a tough one. Probably depends on each person's values, their perspective.
You've got a point there. Our own beliefs, what we expect. It shapes how we see athletes, their legacies, the whole thing. Do we see them as entertainers? Their job is to perform, to keep us happy.
Yeah.
Or is there more to it? Do they have to represent our values, be a certain kind of person?
I think it's a mix, honestly. We're drawn to the athleticism, the skill, the excitement of the game, but we also want to believe in the players we support. See them as heroes who represent the best parts of the sport.
All right, and that's where the human element comes in. We're not just interested in the stats. We want to know the stories behind them, the struggles, the victories, the things that make them who they are. And Vanderjagt's story, it reminds us, even the most talented people, they're complex, they make mistakes, they can do amazing things, and they can mess up.
And that resonates with us, right? Because it reflects our own humanity, our own ups and downs, our pride, our humility. It forces us to ask those tough questions about forgiveness, about redemption, about the impact we have on others.
It's kind of funny in a way. We build up these ideas about athletes, put them on a pedestal, expect them to be perfect, but they're just people, you know?
Yeah.
Like everyone else, they make bad choices, say stuff they regret, got to live with the consequences.
And with Vanderjagt, it feels like those consequences have really stuck around. He wants to fix things to make it right. He wants the Colts to, I don't know, acknowledge that he mattered, that he contributed, but it hasn't happened.
It makes you think, does time actually heal everything? In pro sports especially. There's this idea that if you win, everything else goes away. Past problems, they don't matter as long as the team's doing well. But here, it feels like the hurt runs deeper than that.
The interesting thing to me is both sides are holding on to their own stories. Vanderjagt, he thinks he's the one who got a raw deal. And the Colts, they're all about keeping up appearances, the whole image of unity and success.
Yeah, and that clash, those different stories, that's what this is all about. It shows you how power works, the struggle between speaking your mind and what the team demands. And it makes you ask, can they even forgive each other at this point?
Do you think there's a way forward for Vanderjagt and the Colts? Can they actually reconcile, admit what happened without digging up all that old pain?
It's hard to say, honestly. They'd both have to be willing to, I don't know, actually listen, to try and see things from the other's point of view, to let go of the stories they've been telling themselves for so long. Vanderjagt would have to own up to his part in it all. And the Colts would have to be open to seeing what he did for the team, even with all the messiness, the controversy.
It's a tough thing to ask, for sure. But I guess it's not impossible. Maybe this deep dive, maybe it can be a starting point, a way to get people talking about these things. Legacy, forgiveness, how human all this really is.
What I hope people take away from this is, well, a little bit of empathy. That understanding that even in this world, with all the competition, the pressure, we're all just people. We make mistakes. We want to be appreciated, recognized for what we do.
It's a good reminder, right? The stories we tell ourselves, the ones we cling to, they affect our relationships, our ability to move on. And sometimes the hardest path, the one that's full of challenges, that's the one that leads to forgiveness, to making things right.
Yeah, and maybe this story, maybe it can encourage us all to be a bit more understanding, a bit more forgiving. Not just in sports, but in our own lives, too.
So there you have it, the tale of Mike Vanderjagt and the Indianapolis Colts. It's about so much more than just missed field goals and saying the wrong thing. It's about our emotions, the messy nature of legacy, the power of the stories we tell. We hope this deep dive has given you something to think about, some new ways of looking at the world of pro sports, the people in it. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and most importantly, keep the conversation going.